The House of the Dead is a first-person, light gun arcade game released in 1996 and internationally in 1997 by Sega. Players assume the role of agents Thomas Rogan and G in their efforts to combat the products of the dangerous, inhumane experiments of Dr. Curien, a mad scientist. Gameplay: The House of the Dead is a rail shooter light gun game. Players use a light gun to aim and shoot at approaching enemies. The characters' pistols use magazines which hold 6 rounds. Players reload by shooting away from the screen. A set of torches next to the magazine of each player represents remaining health. When a player sustains damage or shoots a civilian, one of their torches is removed. The player dies when all torches are lost. First aid packs are available throughout the game which restore 1 torch. These are found either in the possession of civilians whom the player has rescued or inside breakable objects. Similarly, there are also special items located in breakable objects that will grant a bonus to whoever shoots it. Throughout the course of the game, players are faced with numerous situations in which their action will have an effect on the direction of gameplay. This is exemplified in the opening stage of the game when a civilian is about to be thrown from the bridge to his death. If the player saves the civilian, they will enter the house directly through the front door. However, if the player fails to rescue the civilian, the character is redirected to an underground route through the sewers. If the player rescues all civilians, a secret room full of lives and bonuses is revealed toward the end of the game. Story: On December 18, 1998, AMS agent Thomas Rogan receives a distressing, short phone call from his fiancée copyrightee, Sophie Richards at the Curien mansion, the home and laboratory of Dr. Roy Curien, a renowned biochemist and geneticist. Amidst a series of ominous occurrences and disappearances at the mansion, Rogan arrives on the scene with his partner, Agent G, to immediately discover the estate overrun with hellish creations. A mortally wounded man gives them a small field journal showing information about all of Curien's deadly creations and their weak points. It is used every time the players are confronted by a boss. It is revealed that Curien was obsessed with discovering the nature of life and death. While supported by the DBA Corporation and its own team of scientists, Curien's relentless pursuit of this goal slowly drove him insane, with his behavior growing more erratic and the nature of his experiments beginning to take a gruesome turn. Curien's plan for his research ultimately resulted in the release of his experimental subjects free into his mansion. Wasting no time, Rogan and G storm inside the mansion in order to find and save Sophie, as well as the several other scientists trapped inside, where they witness firsthand the terror unleashed by Curien's zombies and abominations. When Rogan and G arrive at the mansion, they find Sophie, but she is just as soon captured by a gargoyle bat-like abomination called the Hangedman, who takes her away to the mansion. They later find Sophie in an empty room, but she is knocked against a wall by Chariot, a grey armored super soldier carrying a blood-stained halberd. Rogan and G defeat Chariot and attend to Sophie, who seemingly succumbs to her injuries. Rogan, in a fit of rage, goes off to avenge his fiancée copyrightee by seeking out Hangedman. He and G find him on the rooftop surrounding the courtyard, where he intends to stop them. He then drops 2 scientists to their deaths before fighting Rogan and G. He nearly kills them by knocking them off the roof. They finally shoot him down, causing him to fall to his death. The 2 push on to find Dr. Curien, while having to fight an even larger horde of zombies in the process. They eventually reach him, but he escapes into his underground laboratory and releases the hermit to finish them. They manage to kill it, and continue the chase. Upon confronting Curien a second time, the AMS agents are introduced to his masterpiece, the Magician, a humanoid demon-esque creature that possesses a mastery of fire. After Curien releases the creature from its incubation chamber, the Magician reveals itself to be self-aware, refusing to serve any master. Dr. Curien is subsequently killed by his creation. To prevent the Magician from escaping the mansion and destroying the world, Rogan and G confront it in one final battle. Before dying, the Magician gives one last, chilling warning, and then explodes. Rogan and G leave the mansion, taking one last look at it from the outside. There are, however, alternate endings that the player can achieve upon completing the game. One ending, in which the camera pans to the foyer one last time. The doors open, revealing Sophie to be alive, running towards the camera saying thank you, showing that her injury from earlier did not kill her. Another shows Sophie has now become one of the undead the last corpse remaining, all depending on the player's final score and the number of continues used. Characters: Thomas Rogan, a young trained AMS agent who arrives at the Curien mansion to investigate a series of recent disappearances, alarming events and rescuing missions at the Curien mansion. His fiancée copyrightee is Sophie Richards, from whom he receives a distressed phone call, is an employee at the mansion. He, along with Agent G, must hurry to save Rogan's fiancée copyrightee and, in the process, uncover evidence of depraved scientific endeavor and soon become attestors to the birth of a horrifying evil that must be stopped from leaving the mansion. The character's last name was misspelled as Rogan on the arcade cabinet. Agent G, an AMS agent and Rogan's partner, who accompanies Rogan to the Curien mansion. If players choose him as the first character, the in-game dialogue in the scene will change. For example, Sophie will address him differently upon arrival at the mansion. Dr. Roy Curien, an acclaimed biochemist and geneticist who worked for the DBA Corporation and the main antagonist of the game. He was responsible for the Curien Mansion incident. He was obsessed with discovering the very nature of life and death, which eventually drove him mad. His increasingly questionable methods and experiments garnered the suspicion and alarm of his colleagues, until it was too late. His deteriorating mental state culminated in the creation and wanton release of hideous monsters from the laboratory to the mansion and surrounding estate. Thanks to the efforts of Rogan and G, the creatures were prevented from escaping the mansion grounds. Sophie Richards, Rogan's fiancée copyrightee, after beloved wife. She tried to call Rogan for help upon onset of the disaster. She managed to escape the mansion, but was somehow knocked unconscious and is found by Rogan lying in front of a fountain in the front courtyard. She awakes and runs for Rogan G but is captured and brought back into the house by the hanged man. She is later found in a large room inside the mansion, but is severely wounded by the chariot. Her survival depends on the rating the player receives upon completion of the game. If the player gets 60,000 score or above, the good endings scene appeared. If below 60,000, she is the undead, the last corpse. While the player's performance would determine her survival in the first game, canonically she survived, married, and had a daughter with Rogan, whom they named Lisa Rogan. Daniel Curien, the mysterious son of Dr. Roy Curien. Though he's mentioned in the Sega Saturn manual of the game. Sentient mutants, the magician, Dr. Curien's ultimate creation, a humanoid demon with mastery over fire and powers of levity and anti-gravity propulsion. Realizing that it need not take instruction from inferior beings and that it is more powerful than its creator, it disobeys Curien and destroys him with a fireball. It is defeated at the hands of agents Rogan and G. With its final breath it utters one final, ominous threat to the agents, a grim harbinger of future events. You haven't seen anything yet. Before exploding violently in a cataclysmic fireball before the winter sunset. It would be reanimated once more just over a year later by Caleb Goldman as the penultimate boss during the events of the House of the Dead 2 to oversee the culmination of Curien's unfinished research and safeguard Goldman's magnum opus while it goes to completion. The Hanged Man, a semi-sentient gargoyle-like beastman who controls the Devilians, mutated bats who also did not escape the scourge of Curien's research. It is the secondary antagonist in the game who is encountered before the truth behind Dr. Curien's research becomes apparent as the agents travel deeper into the mansion. The Hangman's DNA would also be utilized by Caleb Goldman to create Zeal in the House of the Dead 2. The Hanged Man is, however, only sentient to the extent that he can speak. He therefore remains servile to his masters, unlike the magician. Reception: The House of the Dead garnered generally positive reviews, the arcade version being held in the highest regard with Allgame awarding it 4.5 out of 5 stars. However, The Saturn and PC versions gained slightly less praise due to their lack of polish. Game Rankings gave it a score of 63% for the PC version and 70.54% for the Saturn version. Ports: the game was ported in 1998 to Sega Saturn by Tantalus, and to Windows by Sega. The conversion suffered from somewhat rushed development. Official Sega Saturn magazine criticized the graphics and frame rate of the game, which ran at 20 frames per second. However, extra game modes were added to the port, which included a home-specific mode that allowed you to select your character. And also a boss battle mode, which pitted you against the game bosses back-to-back. Further reading: The House of the Dead. Xmas Squared. June 1998. External links: The House of the Dead on Moby Games, The House of the Dead at the Killer List of Video Games, The House of the Dead at SegaSaturn.co.uk. References